Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the main event. You back with me, Dan?
And Aaron.
Aaron, I tell you what else is back. In the words of Andrew Gundling, UCL is back for more. Are you ready for it?
It is, and I'm very excited for it. Although this research has kind of intimidated me, looking into 32 teams compared to last year when we came in halfway through the season and we only had to research 16. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for some of these teams to be kicked out.
Yeah, this feels a bit more like season 1 version 2.0 than season 2 after just starting halfway through the first season thinking we're doing all right at this, capitalize.
Yeah.
Just so anyone who's looking to follow us now, me and Aaron fluked basically last season, did all right. I finished within the top 0.8%. I cannot remember what the actual finish was. A, because I don't quite care enough, and B, it seems to delete your history. Like, it tells me the points that I got last year on the hub, but it doesn't tell me what position I finished, unless it does and I can't see it. So someone get at us at UCL Fantasy Pod on Twitter. Let me know how much of an idiot I'm being, please. And Aaron, you finished just outside the top 1%, yeah?
Yeah, because I only
Yeah,
fielded 7 players for the final.
excuses. Yeah, so that was our first season. We don't claim to know anything. So don't believe just everything that we say. And our goal over the next few podcasts is basically we're going to do a group preview. So today's Group A. We're going to go through the 4 teams in the group. We're just going to go through what's been going on with those clubs, transfers, injuries, their current form. But most importantly, we're going to go through who's playing for each of these teams so that we can make some informed decisions, maybe find some bargains, maybe not get stitched up. And at the end of each sort of team, we'll have a little look through who we might suggest at a price point, and then we'll give our predictions that inevitably won't come true for who we think is going to go through from each of the groups. So, first up is Atletico Madrid, Aaron.
Yep, Atletico Madrid. They're having a very modest start to the league. I mean, Atletico Madrid, you expect them to be a very defensive team. Nothing's changed over the season, over the summer, especially you would like some people expect them to change whenever they make an attacking transfer. Last year, they got rid of Griezmann and signed João Felix. So people were like, oh, yes, we're getting more attacking, especially when they beat Real Madrid over the summer, that ridiculous scoreline. So they were like, oh, yes, new Atletico Madrid, and nothing changes. And this year, Luis Suarez come in. They've got rid of Morata, and people were like, oh, yes, we won the first game 6-1, new attack in Atletico Madrid. And then the next 2 games is 0-0.
Yeah.
So some things just don't change. And I think that's the type of approach that we need to take looking at Atletico Madrid for fantasy. Their goal is to just get a good league standing in the run up to Christmas and just make it through the group. They know that on their day they can beat anyone with how organized and defensively sound they are. So it's important that we don't think that they're going to try and beat Bayern Munich to first place. They'll give Bayern Munich a good run for their money, but they're not going to try and dominate the game. They're just going to try and pick up the points in the other two against the other 2 teams. So it's important, I think, first of all, that we don't try and temper. We try and temper expectations in terms of
Yeah.
attacking potential. For Atletico, I guess their players. I've mentioned a little bit about their form. Winning 6-1 is really, really good, and it shows the potential that Luis Suarez has in this team. And I think that if they can start to utilize him a bit more and start to develop the partnerships all up front and start to get used to each other playing, it shows that they do have that potential to just explode at any given moment. But some of the players that I was looking at, and I think that's expected for Atletico Madrid in general, are the defensive players. a lot of
Yeah.
them have had price cuts, which I think is really interesting. All of their centre backs are rated 4.5, well, are priced at 4.5, and their fullbacks are 5 million. So that, although Lodi isn't 4 million like last year, which
Yeah,
is a shame.
he was the bargain that we both had in since game week 1 last year. 4 million for a starting Atletico Madrid defender is ridiculous. So it's a
So
bit sad that we can't get that again. The thing that concerns me with Atletico is the win 6-1. Suarez gets 2 goals, but he comes off the bench to do it. They start that game with the very 90s Premier League tactic of big man, little man up front, Costa, Felix, because last year, Simeone, he always rotates. He loves rotating his team, but he often rotates his system. This year, he's been quite fixed in a 4-4-2. In with Costa and Felix up front, that works really well. And then when Suarez came on to work with Costa, that works really well. The 2-0-0s came when Suarez and Felix, who are their 2 best forwards. The midfield, for me, is now much weaker. That Thomas has gone. We talked about Thomas last year. I think Thomas might be the most underrated central midfielder in world football. He's possibly the best holding midfielder as far as a ball-winning, tough, someone that breaks up the play style player, not necessarily, like a deep lying playmaker or something like that, which that he's not. But in terms of the role that he does, I can't really think of anyone more effective at the moment than him. Maybe N'Golo Kante, but even so, I think, he's
he
not had a
doesn't
great
stay
start of the
fit.
season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he can't stay fit recently. I think he's probably the best player since Kante doing that. I think Arsenal paying 40 million for him as A, steal, and B, because they triggered his release clause, I don't know why they didn't just do that a month ago. It doesn't really make much sense. Torreira is a good player, but he's not at the standard of Thomas, in my opinion. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how he develops under Simeone, because they're both aggressive players, aren't they? Like, I see one in another. I don't think Torreira's the quality of Simeone when Simeone was a player, but it's like that, the Carlos Tevez bulldog approach sort of thing. The centre backs are changing. The only centre back that started the first 3 games of the season is Felipe, and Trippier started every game at right back. Lodi started every game at left back. So I think if you wanted to go for an Atletico Madrid defender, be super safe with the full backs, or if you want to save that 0.5, then maybe Felipe is probably the best option out of those. But Thomas has started both of those 0-0s, and now he is not there. Other transfers out haven't been too important, like Enrique at left back, Arias at right back. They weren't playing too many games anyway. Kalinic up front. But one of the big things that we need to take into account when we're looking at what's going on at the minute with those sort of centre-back partnerships is that Jimenez tested positive for COVID-19. So he's not been available for the last couple of game weeks anyway. So we don't know how that would affect the team, because Jimenez, I think, does slot into the position that Felipe fits. It's usually one or the other with them, and going with Hermoso or Savic. So I wouldn't mind another game's worth of data if I was to go for Atletico Madrid defenders. But spoiler alert, I won't be. It's better defenders in the game for me personally.
Yeah, I think the only defender for Atletico Madrid I'm interested in is Trippier. I remember last year, and I was saying it on the podcast, is that literally every other game they switched Trippier, Arias, and it just constantly switched back and forth. They've got Vilchalko back, so I'm not sure about whether he'll come. He was injured for a lot of last year.
Yeah, he was.
But Trippier on set pieces, corners, and just with his crossing ability, he's someone who, for 5 million for a very defensive team, is probably the only one who tempts me. Lodi picked up a lot of yellow cards last year. Trippier seems, not that he's a better defender. I think a lot of, especially people who followed Tottenham, question his defensive ability, but he has improved a lot under Simeone. And so I think for 5 million, if you look at other 5 million players, you kind of get what you pay for, but he just has a bigger upside. He has a bigger ceiling than a lot
Yeah.
of other people.
I thought he was excellent for Tottenham, except for that he had one season where he actually, to be fair, for the first 6 games of that season, he was the best defender in the league. And he, you know, from a FPL point of view, he was getting assists and goals, and then he just fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what happened because he just had a blinding World Cup for England as well. But between the two of Trippier and Lodi, Trippier's a no-brainer. Set pieces, consistent performer. Lodi was excellent last year because he was 4 million.
Mm-hmm.
To get a 4 million player that starts every week, first of all, is good enough when you're allowed to rotate your team, because you can have a punt, and if it doesn't quite work out, providing they don't get sent off, you can change that team. So the game is very forgiving in that way. So that was Lodi's appeal from last season, because I'm sure in the group stages he maybe got 1 assist, and then obviously got a couple of clean sheets. Do I want that for 5 million? Not particularly. For 4 million, yes, please, all day long. So I think if you got a toss up between Lodi and Trippier, for me personally, now that we've said this, Lodi will get the first assist for Atletico Madrid of the Champions League. But I think over the course of the group stage, I do think Trippier is probably a better option and has a, as you say, a much bigger upside. And at the same price, it's a no-brainer. Is there anyone else in that team that you would have a punt on at all?
Saul is an interesting player because he kind of scores in bunches. Like against Liverpool, like he scored in both legs, but then he'll disappear. And he's someone who's never really highly owned, so he is always a differential. But when I had brought him in last year for the knockout tournament, and they got a penalty, João Felix then took it. So he's not someone I would bank on, but I think he is a cheaper penalty option at 7.5.
I was just about to look. That's what I was looking for. How much he costs?
Yeah, he's never highly owned, but I think Koke is even cheaper, which is rare, especially because when depending on the type of opponent that he plays, Koke sometimes plays as a left winger, or even on the wings. Like he's the more attacking out of the two. So for 7 million as well, it's just whether you look at their fixtures in the group stage and think, is there points here? You know that Atletico Madrid midfielders are going to get ball recovery points, which is something that if you're not used to the game, you get rewarded for defensive displays, unlike FPL and other things where it just focuses on the goals. Like they're going to get the defensive points because they're a very defensive team, but when they score, you kind of regret not having them in your team because it's going to come all at once. And it's just kind of whether you weigh up the risk, and the rest of the group is very attacking, and there's the potential there for that.
Yeah, I think between Koke and Saul, I think Saul's the better pick. Koke, when he plays on the right, is usually against a tougher opponent. And what happens is they allow Carrasco, whoever else is playing on the left wing, to push forward, and they tighten up to make a midfield 3 that's really compact so that they can't be hit on the break. So yeah, you might get a couple of ball recovery points as well, but with Saul having the upside of potentially taking penalties when we don't know how much Felix is going to play, because at the minute Felix Suarez is the combination, but I do think Felix Costa with Suarez coming off the bench, or Suarez Costa with Felix coming off the bench, is a better option. Between Felix and Suarez, because I wouldn't have Costa personally, Felix at 9 million seems more appealing to me personally. But I'll be honest, I think I'm going to avoid Atletico Madrid players. I don't think they've had the best start of the season. When you look at the 0-0s, they've not played, who we'd consider a great team. And don't get me wrong, with how crazy the start of the season's been, there are some teams that would love 2 0-0s right now for their stature. And yeah, they've won 6-1, but sometimes you get games like that where teams just down tools. It could have been 3-0, but they've went, oh, we're getting hammered here, I can't be bothered. And then, Suarez coming off the bench and smashing in two. Maybe it's food for thought, really. It's entirely everyone's preference. Atletico will probably come to bite us on the backside because we do this every year where we think, oh, they can't do this, they can't sustain this, or, they've not had a great start, and then they just come and wind us all up with clean sheets.
Literally
That
every
being
year.
said, for their price points, I think Felipe is the one that I'd lean most into for me personally, and I'm not too bothered about their attacking assets. We'll move on to Bayern Munich, so we're not here all day on Atletico Madrid. For anyone wondering, we are just going through each team in the group by alphabetical order. So Bayern have had a pretty quiet transfer window, but it seems that the players that have moved are quite big. That have had a few sort of youth players go, some upcoming talents, but if they're not really playing anyway, then it didn't really matter. But obviously they've lost Thiago to Liverpool, Perisic has went back to Inter Milan, Coutinho's went back to Barcelona, Odriozola's went back to Real Madrid, and they've gotten two wingers in Douglas Costa and a little-known guy called Leroy Sané. Sané has been injured since the end of September. He had a tear in his joint, so he'll be coming back hopefully by the start of the competition. Coleman's also had a muscle issue, but he should be. I think he's back now. To be fair, I think he was declared fit a couple of days ago. They've had another sporadic start to the season, winning 8-0. Then I'm saying they drew 1-1 with Sevilla. They did win 2-1 after extra time, but in 90 minutes they drew 1-1. They then lost 4-1 rather unceremoniously, but they're back with two wins. Not the most convincing, 3-2 and 4-3. So looking at it, Bayern Munich defenders, you should be wary of them. There is one that I do want to talk about. They've also been jumping around with the centre-back partnerships because it seems to be Sula and Boateng swapping places each game. I'd bank on Sula starting because Boateng was a defender in the 4-1 loss. And also Sula started in the Super Cup against Sevilla. So if we go off that, I think it's more likely that Sula would be a starting defender than Boateng. And also we've seen Boateng's sort of injury history over the last year or so. He's really struggling for fitness. Alaba has had, quite frankly, a dreadful restart and start of the season. I think he's better than what he's showing, but at the minute, he's not been very good. He's been a bit of a liability. We saw that in the Champions League for the restart. We saw the own goal against Barcelona, and anyone can score an own goal, but his general performance was pretty bad anyway. And that role should suit him playing the high line because he's really quick. And he's not really forced to rely on his defensive positioning within a centre-back form because he started off as a left winger. He played central attacking midfield for his country. Then he gets moved back to left back while still playing calm for his country. And now he's a centre-back, so I appreciate that's not his position, but that still doesn't make me feel any better about him as a fantasy asset. Hernandez has been jumping in between centre-back and left-back. Davies has played 3 of the last 4 games, though, whether that be left back or left wing. But the big one for me is Joshua Kimmich. So he's played every game, but he's a defender on the game again at 6.5 million. However, he's not played defense once. So Kimmich has played holding midfield a couple of times. He scored from holding midfield, but he's also played as a central attacking midfielder and a 3-2 win, and he scored there as well. So if you're looking for a premium centre-back, I think there's 2 outstanding choices, and one of them is Joshua Kimmich because he's just not playing in defence. And I love a player that is listed as a defender, might get clean sheet points, but ultimately is playing midfield to get all the other points anyway. And would I pay 6.5 million for Kimmich if he was listed as a midfielder? Maybe. So why not as a defender? I appreciate with the amount of goals they're shipping, that might be a bit of a risk. But I think when you look at the teams that they've got in the group, I don't think they're as likely to concede as many goals. And obviously against Sevilla, who are a really good team, where maybe concentration levels were a bit higher, we saw that they didn't concede a lot of goals. In Sevilla, I think if Sevilla were in this group, they'd be a better match than the other three teams at the moment for start of season form and the form at the end of last season. So it's still good to go with Bayern. Pavard's played right back for 3 of the last 4 games, but Richard started the last game at right back and got 2 assists. So that's pretty interesting. I don't know whether it's worth a punt personally, but it's something that people may want to consider if he's cheaper and they want to take the risk for the upside, knowing that they can't just transfer him out or substitute him out. Sorry. It's been a quiet start for Lewandowski. He has scored 4 goals in 4 games, but all 4 came in one game. He'd blanked the first 3 games, although he actually didn't even start the second game, where they lost 4-1. So probably a bit harsh. He's actually got 4 and 3 then, looking at it that way. And he got the assist against Sevilla. He scored a few goals again that have been ruled off for offside. He's still probably the best striker in the world. So anyone that says don't go Lewandowski, I wouldn't believe. As it happens, he's not in my draft, but that's because you can't have everyone. I think, like I say, though, looking at those players, for me, Kimmich is the real standout. Gnabry is someone that we all had last year. Or did you not have him, Aaron?
I kind of in and out of my team.
Yeah. He's not really had a good start of the season. I think his performances have been fine. For my sort of form that I've looked at, I've not looked at the 8-0 win. Sorry, I'm just talking about the last 4 games. So I think everyone scored in that 8-0 win, to be honest. But for the last 4 games is what I'm looking at here. He's not had a return, a goal or an assist. So maybe something to think about. But again, buying one of those players where if you don't have some of them in, they are going to punish you. And ultimately it comes down to price points. The annoying thing is you can't have everyone. And I just think this is one of the more difficult groups, personally. So
Yeah,
it's a bit tough. Is there anything that you've noticed?
For Bayern Munich, I think Sane is tempting because he's cheaper than Gnabry. It's just whether he'll. I mean, he's definitely an upgrade on Perisic than what they had last year. So, and they used him a lot during the Champions League. I think that was just because of Koeman's injury, though. So I just think it's pretty brutal because you could have someone not playing often and then come off the bench for 10 minutes and score 2 goals. Like it's this Bayern Munich team just tortures teams. I think something that is interesting as well is that Muller is listed as a midfielder this year when last year he was listed as a forward. And so, but 10 million is a lot when you'd rather probably go for Gnabry.
Yeah, I think when we're getting to some of the other groups, there are a few out of position players, some good, and there's one in particular that I won't ruin now that's got my blood boiling, that he's listed as a forward and not midfield. That's a joke. But Muller's a good example of the other way around. And I would never bet against him. Obviously, he's a really hard worker. He's someone that can get interception points or recovery points. But because he does play in an attacking position, he can get goals. He's got 1 goal and 2 assists in the last 4 games, which makes him one of their most informed players. Davies has had a weird start to the season. We talked about at the end of last season that we disagree with most of the planet that think he's the best left back in the world. He's not. He's a really good left back for his age. And there is no doubt in my mind that one day he will be the best left back in the world, providing, he stays injury free and he keeps on getting coached at such a high level. No doubt whatsoever. I'm not slagging the lad off,
I think
but
with
he's
how
just not like he's had that 4-1 game. He was really, really bad. He didn't have a good final. Nerves. I can't imagine how nervous it must be playing in a Champions League final.
and
He's
like I
hit
think
a
as
little
well,
back
like
passes, but
with how dominant Bayern Munich are, if you put probably a current Marcelo in that team, people would be like, oh, he's back to his best. But that's just because he doesn't have to defend. Like he doesn't have to defend as much,
yeah.
as he would for Real Madrid. And I think Alphonso Davies, he's so fast that it kind of makes up for his positioning at times. I think if you put a better left back like Robertson in this team, how good would Robertson be? I think it's
Oh,
just
unbelievable. Yeah, it seems everything that Davies does is a recovery tackle or like a mazy run forward. But then sometimes he's too quick. Like when you've got Lewandowski and Muller up front, he gets beyond them and then he's in the box and he's sometimes alone because
yeah.
he's too quick for his own team. What I will say, he's unbelievably entertaining to watch
Mm-hmm.
for both reasons. Like it's a bit like Roberto Carlos. I think everyone like Roberto Carlos is one of my favorite players of all time. My first non-Newcastle strip was a Real Madrid strip with Roberto Carlos on the back. And so like it's easy to look at players like that through rose-tinted glasses, but Roberto Carlos was a really bad defender. But that's not why you watched him or liked him. It was because he'd go on crazy runs and put amazing balls into the box and take 55-yard strikes or have worldy free kicks that could smash a man in the face in the wall or bend on the outside of the post and go in. And although Davies isn't that kind of player, like in terms of like technically gifted, the fact that he gets caught out defensively is exciting one way, but him driving at defenses and taking people on, borderline taking the mick out of people, is really, really entertaining to watch. So I'm looking forward to the Bayern Munich games. I'm not looking forward to seeing who scores when I don't have them in my team. I think talking to you, Sané and Muller are definitely going to be added to the Kimmich watch as well.
Mm-hmm.
For all of these games and all these teams, we do have another game to watch. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The only problem is with some of the big teams is obviously rotation a lot of the time. But as you say, even if a player comes on, gets 10 minutes and you think, well, they could do a Mahrez last game of the season, come on and get a couple of goals. But if they don't, and the risk is on that first match day, on the Tuesday, and it doesn't come off, then obviously you have a substitute waiting to happen. It is a lot of money to have ploughed into a player that doesn't play, though, sometimes. But I think Sané is likely to start. I think their best team does revolve around Sané, Gnabry, Lewandowski, and Muller. So
Yeah, definitely.
if it doesn't work, then I still think we've got to go with our best guesses. On to Lokomotiv Moscow, Aaron.
Yeah. So the Russian league, for those who don't know, have started their season a lot earlier than a lot of other leagues. And so they're already 10 matches in to their season. So there's a lot more data to be able to look at who's starting regularly and who is not. I think, but the main reason you're not really coming to this video to look at how is this team doing in the Russian league, you're looking to see how will this team do in this group. Something that I've noticed is that they are very defensively sound. So I don't think any team except Bayern Munich have the potential to roll this team over. I think these are going to be low scoring games. All of their defenders are 4.5. I probably wouldn't get any of them. However, someone that does tickle my fancy is for the midfield.
Miranchuk. Is it Miranchuk?
Sorry, I'm just getting the name up. It came off the... Yeah, it is. Miranchuk, he is the penalty taker, 6 million. So you're probably looking to fill that kind of 6 million spot with a defensive midfielder. And for another defensively sound team, Moranchuk has the upside of being the penalty taker and currently selected by 0%. That's probably because people haven't done their teams. But
or ever heard of them in their lives.
Yeah, that's true. And for similar players, you're looking at, like, I think Jorginho is 6 million, Kante is 5.5. You're looking at people in like that caliber who are like, there's not many. You're looking for a defensive midfielder who all they do is defend, and he is a attacking midfielder who takes penalties. So if Loka Moscow do something, he has the potential to get points. He's kind of a better punt than defensive mids around that area. So that's something that I was noticing with them. And just something to highlight as well, they have faced the other teams that are in the Champions League from that area. So they've faced Zenit twice. They lost one in the Super Cup final. I'm not sure how much the Super
2-1.
Cup. I'm not sure how big the Super Cup is in Russia. I know different countries place different priority on the Super Cup. In England, it doesn't mean anything.
But in Germany, because it's usually Bayern versus Dortmund or Bayern versus somebody, but generally Dortmund. It's quite big.
But they've also faced Krasnodar. Don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm learning. And they beat them 1-0. And so out of them 3 games facing other Champions League opposition, they've conceded 2 goals, all in the one game, which was the first competitive game of the season. Other than that, they kept clean sheets. And so I think that just shows you what this team is about. Very organized. They're currently 5th in the league. But their current form is quite good. They've won 3 and drawn 2 and kept 4 clean sheets. So it's something that this team, I would temper expectations. I wouldn't, unless Lewandowski's playing on the first day, I wouldn't captain him. Well, sorry, Lewandowski's a bad example because at any moment he can score. But I wouldn't captain, say, João Felix or someone else facing Moscow expecting a rollover, because I don't think that's what this team is about.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at their team as well, it's really easy on the Gaming Hub if you do want to look at their players. If you look at the defenders, if they're 4.5 million and the goalkeeper, they've started the last 4 games. So that's God, here we go with some of these pronunciations. Zhivogliadov, Choluka, Chiquera, and Rebus or Ribus, not entirely sure which one it is. They've all started. In terms of attacking returns, Choluka got an assist in the last game. Moranchuk, who you're talking about being the penalty taker, has 3 assists in his last 3 games. It's 6 million. But also a little find here is Ignatiev. So he has played the last 2 or 3 games, I think the last 2 games, but he got a goal in his last game. He's a midfielder on the game and he's 4.5 million. So we all need a 4.5 million midfielder generally. Depends on what system you're playing. But it does work out to have a 4.5 million midfielder. I think last year it was it Luka Toussaint? Was he the 4.5 million that like got a couple of goals but mainly he got like 4 points every game from getting 6 ball recoveries or 7 ball recoveries. Ignatiev in a group where he's probably going to get a lot of ball recoveries against Bayern Munich. I think that could be a bit of a hammering, but he's not going to lose any points because he's not a defender. I'd personally go for him over the defenders because I don't think they are going to keep too many clean sheets. I just don't think they're going to get absolutely battered, as you say. I'd go for him or Moranchuk if you want a higher ceiling and you've got a little bit more budget. The only other player that's worth considering is Smolov, but 7 million.
I think
Depends
with
on
forwards
like,
as well. With the forwards as well, there's probably better forwards around that price
Yeah,
range, and I don't think
100%.
he's going to score too many in this group.
They've only got one major injury in Baranov. He's done in his ACL. He's out till the end of Feb, beginning of March. And also, just for if you want to listen to future podcasts, there was another Moranchuk who got sold to Atalanta who might get mentioned on that podcast. Don't get confused. He's not been sold. I'm guessing it's his brother. Why not? Although Moranchuk might just be Smith in Russian. And they brought in Ziluis from Porto. So that might threaten Smolov's position, but Smolov has got 2 goals in his last 4 games. Picked up a minor injury. 2 games going a 1-0 win, which is why he didn't play in the 2-1 win afterwards. They tend to play a 4-4-2, pretty fixed. Yeah, I'd go with Ignatiev if you wanted a bit of a punt at 4.5 million, or Moranchuk at 6 for me. On to the last team, Salzburg, who I'm a little wary of just because they've sold their absolute dream forward line, unfortunately, of obviously Haaland and Minamino in January, and they've sold Juan to Leipzig. It's a bit of a shame. The most major transfer in is Soler, which is centre back from Lyon, which doesn't really solve the issue. That being said, they do have some really interesting prospects. No shock to see them top of the Austrian Bundesliga. In their last 6 games, they've won 10-0, 3-1, 4-1, 2-1, 3-1, 3-1, 7-1. Is that 6 games or 7 games? Whatever it is, they're smashing teams. But I think, so what we'll do is I'll quickly go through familiarities of the last 4 games, what's sort of been going on. But also within those last 4 games, there have been 2 Champions League qualifiers, which I think is probably going to give us a better indication of their team because, no disrespect to the Austrian Bundesliga, I don't think Salzburg really need to prioritize that opposed to the Champions League. I don't think it's particularly competitive. So Stankovic is their starting goalkeeper. Valchi's played the last 3 games at right back. They've swapped one of the centre backs between Romaglio and Ongwene. Ongwene is 4 million. Might be a trap because he has played 2 of the last 4 games, but they were both in the Austrian Bundesliga, not in the Champions League qualifiers. Romaglio played those. Woba has played the last 4 games. Ulmer's played the last 4 games. And then they tend to mix it up. They've used 3 different formations in the last 4 games, between a 4-4-2, a 4-2-2-2, and a 4-2-3-1, and then back to a 4-2-2-2. So they're not overly consistent, which makes me think I'm not overly keen on ploughing into random players. Soboslai, a midfielder, is their penalty taker by the looks of it. Providing Okafor's not on the pitch, they seem to have taken the last 2 penalties. But outside of a penalty goal and a 2-1 win, he has also scored another penalty in a 3-1 win, and he got 2 assists in a 7-1 win. So he's been doing really well. 2 goals in the Champions League qualifiers so far. He's 7 million as a midfielder. So that's risky. I think there are other options that are better. But if you think Salzburg are a really attacking team and you think they can do some damage, then he is a player to look at because he might assist the forwards. As far as the forwards go, Daka has played 3 of the last 4 games, although not always up front. That being said, in his last 2 games, he's got 4 goals and an assist. 2 of those goals came in a 3-1 Champions League qualifier, the second leg, and a 3-1 win there. Berisha had played up front for a couple of games, got a couple of goals. but they came the Austrian league. Ulmer looks like he might be a little bit of a shout just because he's played every game at fullback, and in the last 4 games, he's got a goal and an assist. Again, they came in the Austrian Bundesliga, not that Champions League game. It's a bit harsh saying, oh, he didn't score in a Champions League game, so don't get him. It's just obviously so everyone's aware, so it's their decision at the end of the day. But Daka, 11 goals in 7 games so far. It's 7.5 million. Again, if that fits the structure of your team and that fits your budget, then roll with it. Personally, I think there's another player in a different group at 8.5 who I'd prefer to stick in and lower a midfielder to as low as possible and look to get a £4 million defender. There is a £4 million defender who I am going with, who I feel confident with from another group. So it all depends on, do you think Salzburg, A, are going to be able to replicate last season in their goal scoring form because they do have a super talented manager? Or do you think that it's just not as likely because it did just so happen that they had 3 unbelievably talented players? But again, do you think Daka can fill those shoes? Everyone around him seems to be in and out. Koita is the other sort of starting player. He started 3 the last 4 games. He got 2 goals in his last game and a 7-1 win in the Austrian Bundesliga. So they're the ones to look at, really. I put Nguene in my team at 4 million. I'll probably be taking him out because I just don't think as a centre-back he's going to play. The most important thing for me, this isn't like FPL where you can have a £4 million player and think, oh, well, they're not going to play, it's fine. The game benefits having 15 playing players. Now, obviously, you have to work out risk versus reward in terms of how expensive do you want to go versus, for one player versus spreading out the funds. On my mic. So that's a decision you have to make. But when you can have, especially with how crazy the season started, if you pick Trent at 6.5 on this game and he gets a -2 for conceding 7 goals again, do you not want a £4 million defender that, might lose 2-0 and gets a 1-pointer, but that is going to play that you can substitute in? I'd personally rather have that. Or again, if there's going to be a £4 million defender who's playing on the Tuesday night, I can't be playing people on the, thinking, oh, they might get a red card if they don't have a history of getting red cards. It's not the way to play the game. So I'd put them in, and if they do concede a few, I can take them out. If they have, a surprise shock result, then you're getting differential points that other people aren't getting. So, yeah, bit of a tough one. There's Warber at 4.5 million. Centre-back, he's played every game for the last 4 games, including the 2 Champions League games. If you want a safe bet, roll with him. I don't think there's much of an upside to that. If I'm going for a player like that, I prefer the 4 mils. If I'm going 4.5, you'd much... all the Atletico Madrid defenders are 4.5 million for the centre-backs. Mm-hmm. If you can solve that rotation risk, go one of those.
Yeah, and what we're saying is we're not saying that maybe like Daka is a bad player or that we're discrediting a lot of goals because it's in the Austrian Bundesliga. We're just presenting the fact so that you don't have to do the research, really. And what you choose to do with them facts it's up to you. But we're just here to help you and maybe do some of that research for you on the teams that you don't know much about. So
if honestly, if Daka starts banging them in, I'll applaud anyone that's put them in because that's really brave. And I think, people that have a punt, I think I think bravery deserves merit. So if you get them in and you're like, no, I fancy this, I fancy Salzburg, I fancy the way they play, I just look. But you've also got to look at the group that they're in. And it's a decision that everyone has to feel comfortable with within themselves. Is you've got two attacking teams in this group, Salzburg and Bayern Munich. And you've got two defensive teams in this group, in Lokomotiv Moscow and Atletico Madrid. So you've got to go in your mind, do the attacking teams have the tools to break down the defensive teams? And only you can feel comfortable with what you think's going to happen in those games. So it's not up to us to tell you. We can just say what they've done. So for me, I think this is one of the hardest groups to predict because of the nature of it and the nature of the starts. But that being said, let's give a prediction, Aaron. So you can put your... Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first. I think Bayern Munich finished top. Atletico Madrid second. Salzburg finished third. And Lokomotiv Moscow fourth. But I don't think it's going to be much in it. I think Salzburg and Lokomotiv Moscow could switch easily. And
such a dullard answer. That's not what the people want, Aaron. Want controversy.
And I think Salzburg could catch Atletico Madrid depending on... Because I think Atletico Madrid really, really, really run the risk of going to Moscow and Simeone being like, we cannot lose this game and it's a 0-0. And Salzburg go to Moscow and win. I think it could come down to that.
You've given the most Martin Keown answer possible there of, what do you think the score is going to be, Martin? Well, I think they're going to win the game, but if this happens, then they could very well lose the game. So I'm going to go with the draw.
They run the risk of it because the teams that Atletico Madrid drew against, they should have beat. And you would think with the difference in funding, Atletico Madrid should beat Lokomotiv Moscow. But with how defensive the two teams are, there's a huge risk that it's a 0-0. Salzburg, kind of with their just fearless mentality, they're just going to go and attack Lokomotiv Moscow in Russia. And I think that's where it's going to come down to it is who can get the points in Russia between them two. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I'm going to stick my neck on the line. I do think Bayern will finish top. I'm going to go Salzburg second, Atletico Madrid third, and Lokomotiv Moscow, but I think last. I just think Moscow, it's probably much easier to be okay defensively in the Russian league because I don't think a lot of Russian teams have the tools to break them down. I think the teams that they're going up against will have the tools to break them down. I think Bayern are too good offensively, and again, I don't think some of the teams in this group have what it takes to score a couple against them either. And I think a lot of it might come down, as you say, Salzburg versus Atletico Madrid. And I think from what we saw from lockdown or post-lockdown last season, I don't see why Salzburg can't do it against Atletico Madrid, do what Leipzig did. So yeah, I'm happy to stick my neck out and say that. Also, I think Atletico Madrid will have a harder time against Moscow because it's two defensive teams. That being said, I do think they'll win because I just think the quality of Felix and Suarez we joked about it on the last podcast. Whoever's idea it was to put Costa and Suarez in the same team is a naughty, naughty person. And I just can't wait for them to kick off. I do want Atletico to go through because against the bigger teams, I just want to see them scrap people. I just want to see them fighting with everyone. It'd be absolutely glorious. Just, yeah, that's what I want to see. So, but at the same time, it's nice to get other teams go through. It does get a bit boring seeing, out of 16 teams, it's usually like the same 12, and then you get like 4 others by virtue of the group that we're in. I'd like to see Salzburg. I'd like to see an Austrian team represented in the last 16. So yeah, I'd like to see them go through. But we've talked about that enough. We've got plenty of other podcasts to come. So the next podcast is going to be on Group B. I'll see you then, Aaron. Take care,
Yes.
everyone.